Hello, I am Brian Foster, and today I'm talking about Spiritism, and we are live streaming on this Tuesday, February 15th, 2022. We are on Chapter 9. This is the third part of Chapter 9, The Harvest of Jealousy. Before I begin, let's have a short prayer. Dear Jesus, please help us all achieve enlightenment, and I know that you'll give us all our own special path in order to discover the reality of the spirit world and the reality of God and you and the fact that we are immortal souls, that we are here on earth to learn. Please show us the signs and signals so we may find the milepost on our journey to discovery of what the spirit world and what is our goal in life to become a pure spirit. Amen. So, the Through the Mist is a book by a man who wished to remain nameless, although people did call him Fred, so I'll call him Fred too. We've gone through quite a few chapters, and in chapter 9, he went to this special place, and it was kind of a little bit in the lower levels of heaven, either probably the upper levels of the lower zone, which goes from the crust of the earth to the lower levels of heaven. Through this woman spirit who had been through just a horrible trial in the lower zone for what she perceived she did wrong in the in Earth during her physical life. Now, this very nice man had been helping her, and he took her, a very nice high spirit, I should say, and he took her and he created this kind of guarded garden and house in the middle of this garden. And he'd been helping her, and this other woman's spirit has been helping her. And now our spirit, who is being taken around and showing different places of heaven, is there. And he is talking to this woman. And she is telling him her story because I think they brought him here because when she says her story, it helps. It's a it's a reliving the story helps cleanse herself. It helps her recover from what she had done before. Oh, before I begin, so I don't forget, if you're interested in Spiritism, let me hide this for a second. I started too quick. I'm too excited about the story. If you're interested in Spiritism, please read my free PDF, Spiritism 101, The Third Revelation. It's on my blog, nwspiritism.com. You can download it for free on PDF, but it's also available on Kindle, 99 cents, paperback, and in Audible format. So it gives you a good overview, and from there you can go on to explore the Spirits book by Allan Kardec and any other books you would like to read about Spiritism. It tells you so much about the spirit world, and this is why I'm bringing this to you, is because Through the Mist was written in the very early or late 19th, 20th century, early 20th century, and it's one more spirit talking to a medium to try to reveal to us the reality of heaven and what is waiting for us. And we have been getting these messages for over 100 years now, longer if we start from 1850s from Allan Kardec, of the spirit world exposing what heaven is like, what the process is, what the rules are, why you're here on earth, who you truly are, and who you truly will become. All this is to free us from the mendacity and the change of our popular culture, which is gross materialism, and the barriers that we have from religion, saying, "No, you can't do this, you can't do that," right? Oh, that's a sin. This is a sin. Well, no, there are wrongs, and Spiritism does not like call them sins, but there are wrongs. But those are wrongs against your conscience, and there are a set of divine laws that are in each one of you. So explore for yourself. Spiritism is not a religion; it's a doctrine. It's something that you need to discover for yourself. That's why I write books and I do YouTube videos on Rumble and BitChute, and I write on my blog and articles on also my Substack, Spiritism. So it's there for you to read and study and understand why you're here. Okay, let's begin, because this is you can tell I'm excited about this chapter. It's such a good chapter. So she's been telling him about what she's done wrong. And of course, when you pass over from the physical life to the spirit life, you are who you were, right? You don't change. You don't become this angel, all-knowing angel, and you don't start speaking to God. No, spirits tell us that even they don't understand God that well in heaven, the heavens surrounding the earth. You have to go much higher, and you have to earn to go from one level to the next. Now, and I talk about that in my book, especially in Spirits in the Spirit Universe, book 2 of Spiritism. So she tells them that she was born in a Southern family. She had a good friend. She's pretty spoiled. One of the richest people in town. Both she and her friend kind of competed for this new boy that came in town. And she kind of like said, no, I'm tired of you. And so he said, okay. Of course, she was just playing with him, and he didn't know that. So he ended up marrying her friend. Now, her whole life, when she found out, was dedicated to revenge. So she finally found out where this couple lived. And then she went to meet him. And then she met him in the store, quite accidentally. She was going to meet him more up front. But somehow, when she got into town, he saw her first, which was perfect for her plans. So now we'll carry on and show what happened. So she'd met him I think it was a drugstore. And they met a couple times, and presently he asked to keep a clandestine appointment. I refused. He urged it for the sake of Auld Lang Syne. I consented. I was lost, but that was the price I had calculated to pay if I could win him, and I had done it. In less than a month, his wife and children were deserted, and we were flying east. I was happy now that I repaid Sadie's, that was her friend, deceit in her own coin. Of course, she didn't deceive. She's the one that let him go, but that's her choice. She should have understood that was it was a result of her actions, and should have accepted it. I could never be Charlie's wife, but that was nothing. I was his. He was mine, and my account with my rival was square. We were together and alone. That was all I had craved for, and my revengeful prayer had been answered. In my rebellion, God stood aside and let me gather all the necessities for heaven in my own design. And when the work was finished, he bade me enter. Then lo, I found my heaven to be God's exquisite and perfect hell. And this is a great description of how the spirit world works. Because if you have a prayer that is a negative prayer against someone, be careful how that prayer is answered. I was at a medium meeting once in the back of the room, not a medium. And this lady spirit took over this trance medium, and she started saying, Zika, Zika, Zika. Goes, I died of Zika. And it was like, oh, that's kind of sad. You died of Zika. And then she said, this is during when the Zika was, raging in Brazil. And then she said, but I wanted my neighbor to die of Zika, and I still want her to die of Zika. So here you had a perfect example of how a prayer was answered. She had been praying with all her fervor that her neighbor die. I never did find out what her neighbor did to them. She just had this irrational, I don't know if it's irrational or not, but this passion for her neighbor to die. Now she had this passion for her neighbor to still die and be with her in the lower zone. So I think this is proof that I was at the meeting and that people do not change and they do not become rational when they enter the spirit world. You would think that here she had made a negative prayer, a very kind of a malevolent prayer. And she learned nothing, that she died of Zika, that she became an immortal spirit. No, because the spirit world, when you die, the spirit world doesn't bring you up and say, okay, here's all the things you thought wrong. No, they let you stay in your own fantasy. She had been in her own loop, and that's all she was focused on. She wasn't even ready to talk to other people to know that there's a world beyond her quest for revenge. And in fact, that's why they brought her to this mediums meeting in a Spiritus Center in Brazil, is to try and open her mind and say, oh, come on, there's something else than your little, petty desire for revenge for something. I never did find out. So this is what happens. Having accomplished my desire and the tension under which I lived so long, being over a speedy collapse, ensured I had never really recovered from my first blow. but my craving for revenge had given me strength, which was only obtained by heavy drafts upon my constitution. No sooner had I attained my wish and the necessity for duplicity over than attacks upon my vitality put it in its claim, and it was evident that I had but a short future before me. In less than 2 years, I was confirmed invalid, unable to move, while we were compelled to face the awful fact that I was dying. At this time, my father found me, and reproaching me for the dishonor I had brought upon his name, vowed if ever Charlie crossed his path, he would shoot him like a dog. I pleaded with him, but he was inexorable. Told me Charlie had left me as he'd left his wife, and that he had quitted the town and had gone no one knew where, and that it was impossible I could ever see him again. All the old jealous fury came back at this, followed by brain fever, then delirium, and then finally a blink. Now this is before the time that I'm sure they had antibiotics, and so who knows what she really had, but it's probably bad encephalitis or it could be something like that. So she died, and Charlie, of course, just left her all alone. And this is what happens. And so you be careful what you want out of petty jealousy, revenge, or whatever there is. There is this woman. She had a near-death experience, and she had been. It's very interesting. I talk about it. I think in my book, the one I talk about is the spirit world talks to us. And she had what she said was happy marriage. In fact, she said, "Look, I knew I was lucky. I had a good husband. Most of my friends, their marriage was tense, but I wanted to be happier, and I kept praying to God, make me happier." And then what happened? I got into a car accident, and my back was hurt. I was in constant pain, and I was not happier. And so I lost my job. I had a good job. I made good money. I had everything I wanted, but I just wasn't happy. So then I had this bad car accident. And she's on pain pills, all sorts of things. And then she just had another fit of she was just yelling at God and saying, this is ridiculous. I'm not happy. I told you I wanted to be happy. Well, her husband, to help her, kind of, said, okay, let's go out to dinner. So he brought her to dinner. She had too much to drink. And she went on the way home, she threw up in the car. And he said, well, let me help you into the house. He said, no, I don't want any help in the house. She started walking down the path to the house, fell and hit her head on a rock. He took her to the hospital. Then, when she recovered in the hospital, it's like she had this power this empathetic power that just drawn people in, and she could feel what people were feeling, right? She just knew what they were feeling, what their desires were. And then all sorts of people in the hospital started visiting her, and her husband goes, well, you've never been like that before. This is strange. And she said, after that moment, her pain stopped, and she became this empathetic type medium, and she became happy. But her path to happiness was years of pain and suffering and losing all the material wealth she had. But she says she's happier now. So I'm saying, be careful. Okay, let me carry on. When I woke, it was dark, horribly dark. I could almost touch the blackness, and I was lying on the bare floor, as cold as a block of ice. I called my Charlie, my father, my nurse, but there was no response save the echo of my own voice, which seemed to mock and rejoice at the terror I felt creeping over me. Where was I? Great God, could it be possible that I had gone mad, or that I had been placed under restraint to keep me from following Charlie? I rose to make what inspection was possible of my surroundings under the circumstances, but in the ague of my fear I fell without the strength to rise. All my senses resolved themselves in the power of feeling, quickened and intensified 100-fold, that I might contemplate with horror the process of my own petrifaction, voiceless, sightless, sleepless. I'm not pronouncing that right. Um, so she is in the circumstances her own mind made. She knew she was doing wrong, and she was obsessed with Charlie. And yet, in her conscience knew that she was doing wrong, and therefore she was where she understood she should be, a dark room by herself with nobody. I'll carry on. How I prayed for the fever and delirium to return and conquer the icy terror which crept so slowly, so agonizingly over me. Vain prayer, I was a prisoner in the rigid domain of despair. Beyond the help, or rest, or pity, the sportive toy of all the remorseless machinations of which the germane to such a state, which are germane to such a state. I was slowly being converted into a block of frozen yet living flesh, in my normal sense of feeling heightened as the infernal transformation went on. Why was it? Where was I? Who were my relentless persecutors? How long before morning would break? Would the day bring me relief or wake me from the agonizing dream? These and a thousand other queries propounded their unending enigmas for my additional punishment, till I would gladly have rushed into the arms of madness for rest. But alas, I was deprived of even such a consolation. At length, my feet, my hands, my head, my eyes, my tongue, my heart, and my brain were icebound. Then the furies boiled in my blood, lashing it into an angry foam by successive heat, sent it in maddened cataracts through my veins to finish the exquisite suffering which I must need lie still and bear. Of the termination of that period, I have no recollection. Whether I suffered until pain wearied itself out in the intoxication of its own excesses, or whether the intensity of my torture became an anesthetic and lulled me into the sleep of agony, remains a mystery. I only know that for a space my existence lay in oblivion because of its duration and nature. I cannot say anything. So she was deep in her own uh, world, in her own ovoid kind of, spherical sphere is. I don't know if she heard other voices or it must have been in her mind, but she was had constructed through her own guilt, her own personal hell, we can say, not eternal, as you can say that she was up there. So most probably someone rescued from that or moved her to another state. But we'll see where she goes to. Probably not the best state afterwards. Now, this is what happens. So, there is no such thing as hell. There's no such thing as eternal damnification. Whoever you are, and if you go to one of these lower zones or the dark abyss as Spiritism causes, it's a purgatory. You're there till you change and you transform your character, your personality. And it's not there to punish you. She wasn't being punished. She was responding to her own conscience. Your own conscience tells you where you should be. And the law of affinity, places where there's others like you. So if you are a criminal and you're dominant and you're cruel, well, guess what? You're going to be with other criminals who are dominant and cruel to you. And you're going to find out, like, oh, I don't think I like being with people like this. Now, the main thing to think about is that, first of all, is to pray for those people who you think are there. But also remember, I would bet good money that all of us have been there at some past, in the middles of some past lives. We've all been primitive spirits, and we've all ignored our conscience, and we've done terrible things. I know for a fact that I have done terrible things. Now, do I know for a fact I've been in those lower zones? No, I do not. No one's ever told me that, but I'm sure that must have been the result of my actions. Um, Oh, here's a great here's a great comment. It goes, "This reminds me of a time when I was feeling sorry for myself because I tore my meniscus. I then heard a voice say, 'You could have been born in another body.' That was a wake up call. No more complaining." That's yes. So, in fact, interesting enough, the great Brazilian medium, Chico, Francisco C, and they call him Chico Xavier. His nickname is Chico. Anyone named Francisco in Brazil, they usually call him Chico. When he had like this, he was walking along. I think he was. I could remember this incorrectly, but he had this quick interview of this guy on TV, and he says, "Chico, what would you like to say to the people of Brazil?" And he said, I'm just paraphrasing very shortly. He says, "Well, you need to keep your eye on your work and stop complaining," which kind of sounded short and terse, but actually it's great advice because we volunteered, right? Most of us, the people who were in the lower zones or the dark abyss, they were sent. They were sent to the physical existence, and they were given a plan, and their input, maybe some of them was requested, but most of it they were just assigned. But for most of us, we have been, well, most of us who are probably listening to Spiritism, there's only like 3 out of 10 people are in heaven on this earth, or been in heaven. We had worked with our spirit mentors, and we had decided what our plan is going to be and what our body's going to be. Now think of this of your body. If you are too handsome or too beautiful, your life is different, right? In fact, in one of the books by Andre Louise, there's this woman who was in the reincarnation pavilion, and she's looking at her body, and she says, "Nah, you've made me too beautiful." Because if I'm too beautiful, I'm going to have everyone jealous of me. I'm going to be given everything. And my job is to come to earth to learn certain things. It's not to live the life of gratification, of easiness. And I will be I will be put right on the wrong path. No, I'm not, I don't want to be that. And the same with men who are too charismatic. And of course, it's the same as people who are rich, right? They're given too many things. So that's a hard trial. In fact, the Spirits book says the hardest trial on earth is for the rich, because life's too easy and you can be as mean as you want. People will still try and curry your favor, to put it nicely. Okay. Let me carry on here. When my memory again took up the thread of life, I was still in the same state of semi-palpable blackness amid a science which terrified me to listen to. But the sharp agony of my suffering was over, or rather, I should say, a respite had been granted, while the nature of my torment was being changed to one, if possible, of a more agonizing description. I was still ignorant of my whereabouts or of the character of the great change that had really taken place in my career, though I was quite conscious. I had gained strength, was free from actual pain, and acquired the power to move if I desired to do so. I also quickly recognized how incalculable my condition had improved from that which immediately preceded my period of unconsciousness. But I yearned for some degree of light, either natural or artificial, that I might discover my surroundings and make some guesses as to what had taken place, as well as estimate the difficulties to be contended with. The duration of the suspense, in which only my companions were the fantastic shadows of the subterranean gloom, was too long for me to appraise. It seemed to be centuries, but now I know that such could not be. But at length, oh, such a length, I had my wish partly gratified. Okay, so before I carry on, is many spirits in the dark abyss, in the type of purgatory, do not know that this is not forever. They are allowed to believe that as part of their learning experience. When they, of course, as I said before, when they wish to wake up and try to become a better person and know that they are there because of their own conscience, because of their own actions, and try and say, okay, I think I've discovered my own actions weren't too good, and I need to change my character and my path. That's when the spirit world will come and try and help them. But it was so small and far away as to be useless for my purpose. No sooner did I observe it than I was conscious of an involuntary movement, as if it was being irresistibly drawn in that direction. At first, I experienced an almost imperceptible gliding sensation, gradually increasing in velocity, until I was carried from my feet and borne rushing through space, as upon the wings of a hurricane, on and on, league after league, with an ever-increasing momentum towards that magnetic beacon, which, expanding as I traveled, yet appeared to be as far away as ever. Oh, the fear and suspense with that aerial voyage filled me. Now, I don't know how she flew, but now, spirits, can fly because you can move. Thought is action, so you can move as fast as thought. There's no speed limit. There's no the speed of light is not a speed limit in the spirit universe, and they call it volitation, where you think of a distance and you're there, and you can go there. And you can see the scenery around you, or you can be there immediately. So someone may have been controlling her mind and bringing her there. I don't know. Oh, the fear and suspense with which that aerial voyage filled me. It was not the pain of my previous punishment, but the dread of the consequences which might result. I was powerless to avert. It was almost as terrible in its effects. Suddenly, the power by which I had been attracted or impelled seemed to be exhausted, and I failed. I fell, scared but unhurt, upon the threshold of that light to find it radiated around the only person whose presence I sighed and wept and groaned. It was Charlie. I had found him, was with him again. Something told me that the force by which I had been carried hither, reluctantly in my ignorance, was by some means connected with his intense desire to see me. And in my newfound happiness at our reunion, I wept and reproached myself for the hard thoughts I had so willingly entertained against the unknown benefactor who had come to my relief, released me from my prison house, and brought us together again, in spite of my father's strategy and opposition. Then another something dashed my hopes by suggesting that what I saw was only hallucination, the cruel vagaries of a dream, and that I should presently wake to find my father as inexorable as ever, and Charlie gone. I knew not whither. The thought that such a development might be realized was an unbearable one. The shadow of such a suspicion could not be allowed to rest upon me for a moment. I would take measures to resolve the doubt at once. I passed into a circle of light which enveloped him. How much he had changed since we parted! His jet black hair was profusely lined with silver. The once calm face was furrowed. The brightness of his eyes was dimmed, and his stalwart form was bowed. At the moment, he was thinking of me, and I was conscious of his having passed through an ordeal almost as fierce as that I had been compelled to bear. As I reached his side, he murmured my name, while his hand moved as if to make an attempt to take my own. But lost in the depths of his reverie, perhaps unsuspecting that I was so near, he did not raise his eyes to meet my hungry gaze, which was feasting upon the sight of his presence. How happy I felt! His tone and manner revealed to me he loved me as much as ever, and made me fearful to put my project into execution, lest the results should prove unpropitious. Had he not returned to Sadie, but driven from my side, had found this retreat, where it was by no means troubled me or excited my curiosity, where he had perfected a plan for my deliverance. And was he not lost in abstraction as he nervously awaited the result? So lost that he little knew what success had been accomplished. I lifted my head and saw that faraway look had not faded from his eyes, which I noticed a strangely suspicious light was beaming. I started to my feet in horror and shook him, in my fear that the joy of our reunion had proved too much, and that his reason had deserted him. He only shivered as if the room had grown chilly. Then I questioned my own sanity. Could it be possible my mysterious journey had been the delirium of a mad woman's raving? Oh God, I cried, reveal this mystery or it will kill me. Charlie, Charlie, don't you know me? Speak but one word and tell me so. I have been ill, but I've never swerved in my love for you. If you think I've done wrong, oh, my love, forgive me, and let me nurse you back again to health. We will be happy yet. Come, let us go away. Say that you know me, and I will be content. Charlie, just one word, dear. Say you know me. So she has been completely lost in this fantasy of hers and in the spirit world. Some spirit or spirits took her to see Charlie. We will see who. I believe it's probably good spirits to tell her, okay, go see him. Let's get you back a little bit to reality. At this, he roused himself abruptly, picked up a book, and began to read without so much as a word, a look or a sign, and he recognized my presence. Again, this happens quite a lot. She is no longer of the physical world. She no longer has the density that Charlie has. The most dense people are us here, physical on Earth. We live in an objective universe, meaning that wall is a wall. I cannot think that wall to go away. I cannot alter that wall by my thoughts. And I am full of matter and some energy. Someone like her, who's over there, is now, she is a spirit. Now, the lower the spirit, the less ratio it is to matter and energy. She still has much less matter than a physical person like Charlie, but still there is matter in here. We cannot detect her. It's too ethereal for us to detect. Although there are some mediums that can detect spirits. In fact, most of the the couple powerful mediums I know, um, not personally, but I know of a couple I know, uh, really can't drive because they see spirits, and therefore they have to have people drive them around or take a taxi or an Uber or public transportation. Because if they go through the streets, they would like be stopping at random places because there'd be spirits walking around. Um, there's one story of Chico Xavier. He would have these meetings where he lived to help people, and he would give people messages from beyond to help them, solve their pain. And so this one man came, and Chico met him at the door, and he says, "Oh, I'm so glad you came." He goes, "Yes." Chico, "Oh, and I'm glad you brought your mother." He goes, "No, no, no, my mother's dead." He goes, "Oh no, I'm so sorry." His mother, the spirit of his mother was right next to him, but of course Chico could see her, and sometimes he'd be confused who was physical and who was not. And then the next time Chico came up to this older woman that was sitting there, very kind of still, and he goes, "Excuse me, but you're alive, aren't you?" And she says, "Oh yeah, I'm alive." He goes, "Oh, thank God." He just wasn't too sure. Um, wasn't too sure about that. So some people have a hard time. And of course, these spirits, they look, and the lower spirits a lot of times will look pretty bad. They could look, because when you're a spirit, what you are on the inside shows on the outside. It's not like in the physical earth where you can be a very nice person and kind of be plain looking, or you can be a very evil, horrible person. I shouldn't say the word evil. Horrible person who's mean, and yet be absolutely gorgeous on the outside. It doesn't work in the spirit world. You are who you are on the inside, on the outside. That's why angels, higher spirits are beautiful. They radiate. They're just gorgeous. And the higher they go, the more just the beauty that's in them, because they combine all the male and female aspects. They combine all the suffering they've gone through, and therefore they radiate humbleness and love and service. And it's just love coming off of them. And the brightness of angel is not because they radiate brightness, because they reflect the love that's in as the background environment and kind of radiation so far of the spirit world as created by God. So these people down in the lower zones, they can look pretty bad. Like sometimes they look like wolves. And I think that's how probably werewolves and these other myths came about. People had visions, had traveled to the lower zones and below in their dreams. Okay, hold on a second. There, had a little sneeze. Okay. So he was. Let's see. So first, he did not recognize their presence. I recoiled in amazement and dumbfounded. He was not mad, but how could I account for this unwarranted treatment? Why would he not speak? Surely, if my presence was unwelcome, he would tell me so. If he feared the discovery, he would take means to conceal me. If I was still the same to him as before, he would clasp me in his arms and greet me. Anyhow, I could not account for my reception except upon the basis of that cruel suggestion that I was only the victim of a dream. And she may have been there. It wasn't a dream. But of course, he could not see her. He could not detect her. I have heard this pretty often in mediums meeting where people will die. And it's like that movie Sixth Sense. Great movie. Gives you one of the truth, right? Where he thinks, and he actually thinks he's talking to people because it's just like coincidence. And that one boy could talk to him, and so, and yet he was dead. And that's what happens. Where people will go, they'll die, they will go and they'll go they will go to their home. Like say they were in the hospital and say, I'm here. What's going on? And they're like, well, no one's listening to me. And in fact, when my mother died, she was in the hospital, and I got a call about 1 o'clock in the morning saying my mother died. Okay. And so I didn't feel anything at that time. I woke up pretty early in the morning, and I went to her room, and then I just felt her presence. So like she was like right next to me. I could not see her, but I knew it was there. And I said, Mom, you're dead. Open your eyes, see if Dad's there, because my dad had passed away quite years earlier. I said, open your eyes. Don't think you're on the physical plane. See if Dad's there or other spirits there to help you. You don't want to be here. You want to rise. And then she went away. I never felt her presence. I have had dreams with her, and wonderful dreams with her. So I'm sure she's there, right? But I never felt her physical presence again, like I did that. I mean, that's like if someone stood behind you and you knew who that person was. You could look like this and see them. That's how real that was to me. And that was the morning of when she died. And she'd probably been in that room for a while. Okay. God knows my suffering was real. Whether anything else would prove so should be presently determined. For I would watch and wait. By and by, I reproached him for his conduct, to try if that could win a response. But he only smiled and, wearily laying his book aside, turned to someone whom I could not see and said, will you tell your mamma that I wish to speak to her? What did he mean? What was any other woman to him when I was present? Was it possible that he had gone back to Sadie? After all, that's their friend, right? Who took her boyfriend. That's what at least in her mind, and wished her to be at hand to witness my humiliation. All my old jealousy was aroused at the thought, and a sudden frenzy carried me past all restraint. Now notice, in anticipation of the coming scene. So notice, she was just still. She had gone through this terrible experience, and yet she was still in this loop of only thinking about Charlie and being jealous. This is how so many spirits are. They are tied to the lower zone because of hatred or jealousy or desire for revenge. This is why some people are obsessed and who have painful lives on physical earth, because they have these spirits who are around them and trying to get payback for what someone had done to them in the past. This is the world we swim in. This is why it's really important to understand Spiritism, understand the environment you are in. And that's why on our earth, we are on this basic training, right? Where we have to learn to filter everything through our conscience, where we have stupid ideas coming in and good ideas coming in, because we're surrounded by very elevated spirits who love us and want to influence to the good and keep us on track to our plan. And we have not so elevated spirits who would love to see us fail. I felt a stranger enter, but was neither able to see nor hear who it was, a fact adding considerably to the mystery and terror which possessed me. Again, she was so focused she could not see anything else. And there might have been spirits around her too, so you couldn't see them either. Was I equally invisible and inaudible to her? It would seem so. For while I heard every word which Charlie uttered and saw every movement he made, and could understand that the conversation had not the slightest reference to myself, I was still ignored as completely as if I had had no existence. Was it possible they were playing an arranged part to drive me to distraction? Who was this woman? Oh God, that I had been equally deaf and blind to Charlie's conduct as she was to me. It was not Sadie, but I heard him call her by a name he could never have given to me. Then I knew his baseness and treachery, found a full explanation of the conduct I had received. He was simply mocking me, whether she was cognizant of my nearness or not. He was aware of it, had secured my presence that I might witness his happiness with a rival who had supplanted me, as I had taken him from Sadie, that he might laugh as he saw how the knowledge of it would torture me. This was too much. The certainty of his desertion maddened me, but to witness his love passages with my rival goaded me into a diabolical frenzy, and I determined to kill him before her eyes. Alas, ere that I had time to move, the light which surrounded him expired, and I was left again in that Egyptian blackness, afraid to stir on account of the terror which came back with my blindness. So probably good spirits sent her there, like to try and teach her something, to try and expand her knowledge of where she was. Didn't seem to work too well. This made her madder, made her more uh, into that loop. Still could hear him. Worse, I could hear her. Heard without the power to stop my ears or prevent my knowledge of what she said and called him. Rage and jealousy tormented and mocked my helplessness until I prepared to follow the sound and wreak my revenge by laying them dead side by side. Horror! When I would have slain him, I found that I was as powerless to move as I was to see, and I was compelled to stand and listen to her perfidy, unable to make a sound to drown the echoes of his caresses. 1,000 times over, I would have chosen this gradual petrification. I think this is spelled wrong, but maybe I'm wrong. Of my previous state, the tortures of hell were increasing. Was it possible that it could hold anything in store more excruciating than my present punishment? I prayed to go mad, that in my madness I might find relief from such poignant pain. But my prayer came back like a stream of molten lead, falling upon my head and burning fiery channels into my brain, increasing my agony yet 100-fold, and bringing me to a consciousness that my actual retribution was just commencing, that it would continue to increase, and I should be compelled to bear it, since no escape was possible. I was chained to him, and for periods of time, as long as eternity it seemed to be. She was chained to him because she wished it should be chained to him. She concentrated on him. This is why you have to let your mind be focused and make your willpower strong and the foundation of your character strong. You cannot obsess over one thing. There's people who have been tied to the physical world, to the earth, because they're tied to the house they love. There is this spirit that was tied to a very beautiful mirror made and went from museum to museum, and this spirit went from museum to museum, tied to that piece of art. Every physical thing will eventually decay and be gone. Nothing you need physical is here. I was chained to him for periods of time, as long as eternity it seemed to be. I was made to endure this indescribable development of excruciating chastisement, with every nerve quickened to a sense of feeling defying description, while memory itself is not strong enough to grasp its intensity. Madness could not come to my relief. Death could not listen to my pleadings. Insensibility was palsied and could not approach me. Pity was beyond the reach of my wailing, and mercy had not the power to enter the domain in which I was a prisoner. What could I do? Nothing but suffer. Why was it that no one could wake me from such a horrible nightmare? I cried, but there was none to answer me. Again, she was just completely selfish. Well, how comes no one helping me? There's no accountability on her part. I was in all the agonies of hell without even the poor consolation that I was suffering in company. I could not bear it, yet I could not escape. Was there no possible limit to human endurance, no high water mark of vengeance, which, having touched, I should know that my sin had been atoned for? I must have help from somewhere, anywhere, so long as it broke the infernal monotony of my ever increasing pain. Such a quick and lively sense had I of the exquisite tortures which were accumulating around me that I would gladly have served with slavish obedience any power which would manifest itself to change my condition, if only to vary the punishment. So many poor, pitiful people believe that it's possible, but then to get to new punishment, it quite gets old. If cessation was impossible, I would be content to take the rest of change, and for this I made a last appeal, even though my prayer returned, as in the case of remorseless cruelty. Hear me, and in my torments, take me, tear me, or destroy me, drown my reason past all hope of restitution, or by one tornadic blast of torture, put an end to feeling and terminate this agony. Hell, hell, in mercy, take pity on my condition. Open your gates and let me bathe my sufferings in your fiery lake. Hell, hell, I say, in mercy, open and let me in. Wow, that's a mistake, because it just might be. As she proceeded with her story, this is the spirit talking, I perceived that the present faded from her mind, and she was back again for the time, feeling and enduring a recollection of the horrible past. Gradually, she changed into the woman she'd once had been until great beads of perspiration stood upon her face. Her eyes dilated with a maniacal gleam, and she writhed in the sufferings which had been such a terrible reality. When her strength gave away with the intensity of her last effort, she fell exhausted at my feet. I, too, had been so carried away by her dramatic recital as to be oblivious for the moment as to where we were. And as she fell, she looked nervously around, almost expecting to see those mythical gates opening before me in answer to her entreaty. It was with a long sigh of relief that I recognized Krishna and Azina hastening towards us. Krishna was the high spirit. Azina was the spirit that was helping her, another woman. Krishna's a male. Hush, she said calmly, as though the sight afforded him intense gratification. Let her sleep. She will soon be better. Krishna, I cried, can this be true? Yes, poor child, it is true, and much more that is beyond her power to tell you. She had been reaping that harvest of her jealousy for more than 20 years when I first saw her. 20 years. There's this great story in one of the books by Andre Luis, psychographed by Francisco Chico Xavier. And he was down in the lower zone, and he's at this kind of outpost where they let spirits in to help them who now want to change their attitude and character and want help from heaven. And this woman came, and she was dressed in like this old, clothes from hundreds of years ago. She goes, I can't believe I've been tortured for this long. He goes, what's going on? He goes, I can't believe this. He goes, I was a rich woman with lots of slaves. And the priest told me that I would go right to heaven. And I gave him plenty of money the whole way. And in fact, when I died, I left in my will that they would have services. And my son was going to pay them every week to have services in my behalf. So I would rise into heaven. And yet she had been in this state, the lower zone, for hundreds of years. Not more than 20, more than this poor woman. And I mean, this is what happens if people who won't let go of their preconceptions will just, the spirit will wait you out. Okay? You'll learn when you're ready to learn. We're not going to force you. We're not going to come in there and pound you and like knock on your head and say, hello, dummy, you're thinking the wrong things. No, they're going to let you figure it out. They do that too with people on earth. They do that with spirits, even in heaven. They don't lecture you on everything you've done wrong and your misconceptions. They let you figure out your misconceptions. And that's why so many people who have good conversations with spirits sometimes will mistake them for Jesus or God. Sometimes it could be Jesus. I do not consider a possibility. I could be wrong, but I've never heard spirits say anyone have ever talked to God from a physical existence. But many people say they talk to God, but I believe that's a spirit, probably a good spirit, because they give them good information and they talk to them very nicely. But a spirit won't say, no, I'm not God. No, they won't say that. They'll let you figure it out. Just like Paul, the Apostle Paul, when he was met in the road to Damascus and he was met by Jesus. Now, I don't know if I think Jesus probably met him the first time. But as he carried on in his travels and tribulations and bringing the gospel to the Gentiles, he was always in touch, which he thought was Jesus. But actually, it was the spirit Stephen. Stephen was was one of the first martyrs that was stoned to death. And a lot of it, I think, was pushed by Paul, if I remember correctly. Stevens was the one that was talking to him and guiding him through many of his journeys. So they're not going to tell you these things. Krishna, I cried, can this be true? Yes, for more than 20 years. And you saved her. I can well understand why it was her chief pleasure to watch for your coming. But he was too busily engaged with Marie to offer any reply. That's the end of the chapter. So we will carry on. Next chapter is called, and it'll be next Tuesday, an explanation. So we'll probably get more explanation of how he saved her. So I hope that is interesting to people. This is a great book, Through the Mist, and this wonderful man who went to heaven because he was a very dedicated person and wanted to expose this is what heaven's like, because he had been raised, I forgot what denomination of Christianity was raised in London. If it was Lutheran or what, or Methodist, I'm not sure. I could have been. He said he'd been told all these things that were incorrect about heaven. And goes, this is okay. Now I understand what's going on. I want to come back and talk to people. And so he must have found a medium to bring the truth to these people. And so if you would like to really understand how to improve yourself, how to prepare yourself for heaven, how to get yourself to love God, have patience, have calmness, forgiveness, the ability to serve, I recommend this book, How to Live Inner Peace Through Spiritism. It's based upon a 24 stanza poem, very short stanzas, by Andre Luis on how to improve yourself. And exactly, and what I do is I take each stanza, I expand upon what I believe he means, and then I go through from writings with other spirits and my own writings of how to achieve the state he's pointing out. And it's kind of a laddering effect. As you achieve one state, you go to the next state. And this is, I think, is a good blueprint on how to approach your life on Earth. Now, if you're like me and you really want to, okay, but why? Why do I want to improve myself? Is I want to understand, what kind of world do I live in? Who am I? Why am I trapped in this? Why do I believe in reincarnation? How does all this thing work? And the answer is, it's pretty fantastic. And it goes against our culture a lot. And it actually is more amazing and fantastic than any science fiction or fantasy book you've read. It's where thought is action. In the spirit world, your thoughts can create mountains, rivers, just like Jesus said. Faith can move mountains. Faith is the ability. Faith is measurable in the spirit world. And it's your willpower and your faith. You create cities, you create towns, buildings, lakes. You create these things because the spirit world, as I said, remember, I said the physical world is objective. This spirit world is subjective. And that's why some people say, oh, we go to heaven's our own makings. There's some truth to that. Like she went to the hell of her own making, kind of. Of course, it helped. But in reality, we're not this vast, omnipotent spirit yet. So we go to where the law of affinity puts us, and we are affected by other thoughts, and then we see the surroundings around us, and we absorb ourselves into the surroundings. In fact, when you first get to, if you're into heaven, it seems like you're just another city. People walk around. There's modern transportation going around. There's streets and water and all this stuff. You're kind of in a heaven as you see it, as others see it around you on your own level. And of course, you can still, in your thoughts, you can roam, you can volatilate, you can create your own houses within that heaven. You're given a structure. Because if you were just given into this blank space like she was, with no teaching you how to use the tools, how to use your own mind, what attributes you have to influence heaven, you wouldn't know what to do. And in fact, that's part really of what you do in heaven is you go to school, you learn. The Reverend G. Bowen's mother was telling him that she and a group of people were learning how to manifest like a statue of an elephant. And they're learning how to take universal fluid and bringing these things in to create a statue of an elephant. Of course, when they first created it, it was like half alive, half dead. The symmetry wasn't right, the proportion wasn't right, and they all kind of laughed. But they were just learning of how to use universal fluid with the power of their minds to create something as a group. And as part of having learned what heaven is created of. And I believe it's this just complex beyond my imagination structure of where a thought, like you could look at yourself, that if you want to take this imagery, you are in the middle of a simulation game. You're an avatar, but you're not programmed. You are your own program, and you can affect the environment. You can say, no, I don't want to be this river. I want this to be a lake. You can change the programming in the environment around you, and all depending on your level, right? Your level of permissions to make changes. And you can roam around this database and seeing everything around you. But you don't know how to affect things until you start taking training and you get yourself more attributes and tools in your toolbox. This is the power you have to roam an infinite universe for an infinite amount of time. You are an internal spirit, and you will be trained to rise higher and higher in the spirit universe. And as spirits tell us, pretty high spirits in the heavens surrounding the earth, there's areas above heaven they don't understand. And they say you go from the subjective on earth to the objective heaven to the sublime. What that is like, what other dimensions are there, they don't understand. So we're just at the bottom of the totem pole. So be happy. We got lots to discover. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for being